Admiral James Lyons, who was an officer in the U.S. Navy for 36 years, most recently serving as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, the largest single military command in the world. Admiral Lyons has also served as senior U.S. military representative to the United Nations. As a Deputy Chief of Naval Operations from 1983 to 1985, he was the principal advisor on all Joint Chiefs of Staff matters. Please join me in welcoming Admiral Lyons.
Well, thank you very much. I certainly associate myself with my colleagues here on delisting the MEK. Last week, we saw the defeat of the last of Gaddafi's forces and his ultimate demise. Many analysts were saying we can now turn our attention to Yemen and Syria. I found it most interesting, though no consideration was even being given to mentioning Iran. The only headline mentioning Iran, of course, was the failed assassination plot of the Saudi Arabian ambassador in Washington, D.C. Besides from the audacity of the plot, it should be a wake-up call for us to look at what Iran is doing not only in Venezuela, Mexico, but throughout Latin America. Some analysts have termed our relationship with Iran as a Cold War. Let me tell you, it's only been a Cold War from the U.S. side. The Iranian theocracy has been at war with the United States for over 30 years. It has always been a hot war from the Iranian side, starting with the takeover of our embassy in Tehran in 1979. This was followed by the blow-up of our embassy in Beirut, April 1983, where we lost all our Mideast operatives. Following that was the bombing of our Marine barracks, October 23rd, 1983, in Beirut. Now, I want to take you back a moment to that time. We had proof positive. The orders for that bombing came from Tehran. They went to the Iranian ambassador in Damascus, and he was to call in the various terrorist group leaderships from Beirut, and on orders from Tehran, he instructed them to concentrate their attacks on the multinational force, but to take a spectacular action against the United States Marines. He then reported back to the Foreign Ministry on the orders that he gave the group. That report was intercepted by NSA and was published on 27 September 1983. I was the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations at that time, and I did not get that message until the 25th of October, 1983, 2 days after the bombing. Where was that message? It's unanswered to this day. But that same day, I was called out to Langley by Bill Casey, who said to me, If we found out who did it, would I make up the plans to take them out? I said, of course. They found the group. It was the Islamic Amal, the forerunner to Hezbollah. We had our planes loaded, not once, but twice. We could not get authorization to launch. In the words of the Carrier Strike Force commander, Rear Admiral Jerry Tuttle, this would have been a chip shot. We were going to totally wipe out the Islamic Amal. The Sheikh Abdullah barracks were going to look like a plowed cornfield. Our failure to respond is what we're living with today. We have Iran's involvement in the funding, training, equipping of the insurgents that we've been fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan to this day. We also have now positive proof of Iran's involvement in support to the 9/11 hijackers. Why Iran, who has cost thousands of American lives, both military and civilian, remains off limits is mind-boggling to me. The Iranian theocracy has continued to ignore UN sanctions to give up their nuclear weapon program. It should be clear to all that economic sanctions and inducements will not change their drive to achieve a nuclear weapon capability. American officials have said a nuclear-equipped Iran is unacceptable. At the end of the day, our issues with Iran can only be resolved by regime change. The problem is, from the Carter administration forward to the current administration, we have lacked the political will to exercise the proper military response when we have been repeatedly challenged by Iran. Even so, I believe the military option must remain on the table. Congress has more reasons, with Iran's continued acts of war against the United States, than they did for Iraq to enact such legislation. Therefore, I believe Congress should enact, President Obama should sign it into law, Iran's Liberation Act, thereby making regime change in Iran the official policy of the United States government. Further, I believe a $100 million fund should be authorized to support the opposition groups, which would necessarily, absolutely has to include the MEK. I believe such an action would be totally consistent with President Obama's new policy approach of leading from behind. Thank you very much. Great to be with you.